you know, the Argentina has, you know, another reason I come here, Argentina has great experts, both in the government and the president, you know,
Yeah.
current, who are experts on these things, who know more than I do. You should be asking them. Well, just like I am. Just like I am.
Vamos a hablar hoy con quizás la mayor autoridad en temas macroeconómicos vinculados con la inflación, con la historia económica de la inflación y la teoría económica que está detrás en el mundo. Un economista, un macroeconomista que según sus colegas, muchos de sus colegas, revolucionó el modo de hacer macroeconomía y de pensar la macroeconomía ya en la década del 70. Me refiero a nada más y nada menos que al Premio Nobel de Economía Thomas Sargent. Acaba de llegar a Argentina, estuvo en la Argentina reunido con el presidente Javier Milei y también con el ministro de Economía Luis Caputo. Thomas, it is a pleasure, it's really an honor to having you here en la repregunta. Thank you.
It's nice being here.
Well, Thomas es doctor en Economía por la Universidad de Harvard, da clases e investiga en la Universidad de Nueva York en este momento, ha dado clases en las más prestigiosas universidades de Estados Unidos, desde la Universidad de Chicago, la Universidad de Stanford, entre otras, y es autor de más de 250 papers, más de 12 libros, todos vinculados con estas cuestiones. Así que, bueno, manos a la obra, vamos a tratar de entender un poco qué nos está pasando. Tom, there is a huge interest today, globally speaking, in the Argentina case. Media all over the world, political leaders, businessmen are watching Argentina. You also arrived to Buenos Aires attracted for this kind of experiment, laboratory that Argentina has become in regarding to inflation. So my question is, you have studied the historical process and the many historical cases of inflation and the process of stabilization around the globe. What makes the Argentine case so different? Is the Argentine case really a very exceptional one? President Javier Milei usually insists on this idea that Argentina is facing a very unique process.
Well, your question is the Argentina situation experience different? I'd say no. And I don't want to disagree with anything. Actually, if you look at how big inflation started and how they stopped, you know, across the world and across history, they all started the same way and they all stopped the same way. And the way they stopped was you stopped doing the things that started them. Very simply. Okay. And you know, this has happened, you know, the 20th century in Europe and other parts of the world were kind of case studies of this.
Yes.
You know, like your pure case studies had really big inflations. And if you know, there's a bunch of details that differ, but if you look for patterns, which is what we human beings do, you create stereotypes. They're there. And I could tell you what the patterns were, but, you know, I could tell you how to, based on that history, I could tell you, like a good undergraduate economics student, to tell you how to start one, and they could tell you how to stop one. The economics is simple. The politics, you could kind of ask, well, if that's true, the politics is interesting and complicated and often different across the countries. But the economics themselves, they're the same, the macroeconomics.
This pattern that you found and you have very perfectly described, how could you describe it for us? The pattern that explains how it is started and how it is stopped.
Okay, I'll tell you how you start it. Let's start it with you're a country that has a hard currency, meaning you're either on a gold standard or you're on let's say the British pound, which was a hard, you're convertible into another hard currency, which
Yes.
means various British colonies did this. You have your own currency, but it's really just a warehouse certificate for British pounds or for gold. So you're on that. And you basically have the same inflation rate that gold has relative to goods, or that England has relative to other countries. So England had quite stable. So that's that. Now, that's the initial condition. Now, suppose you call me in as an advisor. You shouldn't do it. And you want to start a big inflation. So the first thing I say is you stop doing that and start doing the following. First thing is you start running government deficits, and you start printing money, your own money, as could have your picture, my picture on it, president's picture. Various politicians have done, and it says "In God We Trust" instead of "backed by gold" or "God We Trust," and then which is kind of taking God's name in vain, but that's another thing. And we start printing it, and what do we do with it? The government uses this to buy stuff. And what happens is the price level starts rising. And the rate at which prices rise, that's the inflation rate. And what it amounts to, if you economics, the inflation is a tax on the people who are holding that money. Yeah. Okay. And the higher that tax gets, a lot of people try to evade it. Now, rich people can kind of evade it. They can have, fancy banking accounts that hold minimal, but poor people can't. So in some sense, it's a regressive tax on poor people.
Yeah.
Over and over again. So you can sustain a steady inflation, 40, 50% a year, and you can use it to finance government expenditures. You could buy whatever you want. You can have transfer payments. You can have defense goods.
It's delusional in some way.
It's what?
Delusional. You are living a kind of fiction because you are printing money.
No, it's real.
Okay.
No, it's real.
Uh-huh.
It's real. The reason the currency's valuable is because people need it to make transactions.
Yes.
It's useful.
Yes.
And
but when there is a process of
useful.
printing money, it turns into a delusion of value of the money.
No, it's real. No. That's a great question. It's not an illusion. It's real. It's a real way to raise resources.
Uh-huh.
An example would be, so when did many countries starting doing this? To finance wars. Okay, if you kind of ask, we'll go back in one of the first in the West, one of the first big inflations was during the French Revolution.
Yeah.
And it was during the third year of the Revolution when France got in war with basically all the old powers of Europe, and they started losing the war. And what they did is they started printing money, and it was not an illusion. They used it to purchase defense goods, pay soldiers, and it helped them win the war. So it was not an illusion. And prices rose a lot.
Yes.
When they started winning the war, they did all sorts of things to force you and me to hold money. An example, the French crappy money. And essentially, what did they do? Because we could have used gold or silver. If we got caught using gold or silver, we got guillotined. Some of the guys who got guillotined, they did various things to force us to hold this currency, to make it even better to tax.
Okay.
And they were very successful. It's a great experiment. Okay, so then what happened was they had a big inflation.
Yes.
And then, so somebody knew how to stop it. Do you know what his name was?
No.
Napoleon Bonaparte.
Uh-huh.
Stopped doing that. Started running a balanced budget. Didn't
Just
print money.
political will. Political will?
It wasn't a democracy. It was a will of Napoleon, and he knew this arithmetic.
Yes.
That's the first one. So he stopped doing what started, not printing money. They went back to using gold coins, and he financed his wars in other ways.
Yes.
Not very nice ways.
Yes.
Okay. That's one. Okay, so we could go over and over again. Germany had a big inflation after World War I. Hungary had one.
Yes.
It's all the same story.
But why are the global powerful circle, media, businessmen, politicians, and yourself, no, an academic, very focused on macroeconomics, very interesting in Argentina?
Well, let me tell you, why am I interested in it?
Yeah,
For the first reason, one, I have a number of wonderful friends here. But that's really the second reason. I love to fly fish. I love to fish out in the... I've gone fish in Patagonia.
Yes.
That's the number one reason. It's a beautiful, wonderful country. And I have
Yes.
friends here. It has a wonderful history. You know, not just because of inflation. You know, 120 years ago, so I'm a macroeconomist and I study not only inflation but growth, things,
Yes.
and what makes a country prosperous.
What?
I should be ashamed to say is I don't completely understand, but I'll tell you one thing. 120 years ago, Australia was at the top of the world wealth and income distribution.
Yes.
It was the same level as Australia or Canada, very close to the United States. Today, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
All of those other three countries have surpassed it.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Why?
That's why a lot, you know, so if you see differences, not just an economist, a normal person would say, well, they must, you know, so I'll make a list of why it's different. Argentinians are lazy. Okay. No.
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 No, you are not. Okay.
I'm saying,
No.
here's another one. They speak Spanish. No.
Hot weather.
They came from
it's-
Italy. I'm making up a bunch of things. They don't have businessmen who are smart. No. They don't have workers. No, all those, check those off.
Yes.
Bad. The government adopted some policies like high tariffs, subsidies, various things that I hate to say my own country is starting to do under President Biden and Trump.
Yeah.
Policies that Argentina's done over time that have made it difficult for the market economy to work. Put all sorts of impediments stopping the market to work.
It's a
Stopping the market
conceptual
from-
frame, the conceptual frame that has shaped the way Argentinian society.
Well, it's a frame. It is a framework, and it's a whole collection of institutions that are restricting how individual actions can be coordinated. Lots of them through the government. Okay, and the bottom line is, if you're another country, you do not want to copy Argentinian institutions. They were better than Soviet institutions. In a whole bunch of ways. Better than Venezuelan now. I'm just looking at, you know, the more cluttering up of the market forces, the worse the outcomes. That's kind of the lesson, that just a raw empiricist. So economists are fascinated by that. That's what. Then here's another reason. Turns out, despite its very poor performance in terms of like going from a world-class economy in 1900 to like way far behind where it should be, given its resources, given the education level and the literacy and the Western culture of the people. Despite that, it has produced a string, a very high fraction of very good economists, especially in my field, who are experts, people I learned from. And they've been drawn to economics partly because of this dysfunction. So it's had every bad thing that happens has a positive.
Yeah. Tom, over time since President Milei arrived to the political scenario arena in Argentina, he has been trying to change the common sense of the Argentinian population, of the public opinion, regarding this question of how inflation is produced, which is the cause of inflation. He has been frequently quoting a sentence very famous from Milton Friedman, the idea that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, and also has quoted your sentence on December the 1st. He posted in X this sentence, you are the author: persistent high inflation is always and everywhere a fiscal phenomenon in which the central bank is a monetary accomplice.
That's what Friedman meant to say.
But you added the part of bank, the accomplishment of bank, and the factor of the fiscal.
Yeah, it's an accomplice.
Yeah.
It's an accomplice. Yeah,
because Friedman was focused on the monetary phenomenon, and you moved to the fiscal phenomenon
Not really.
also.
No.
Let's explain this, please.
So this is all about, the common man, the common person has a lot of instincts about economics.
Yes.
But it can get kind of a lot of jargon and technical first.
Yes.
Okay, so the fact is, the distinction between monetary and fiscal policy is not all that clear.
Mm-hmm.
And Friedman was, okay, what Friedman wanted you to ask is, well, why is the government printing so much money? He wanted you to ask that.
Yes.
Well, it was doing it to have a tax on people, to raise revenues to spend for fiscal resources.
Mm-hmm.
So Friedman's sentence was incomplete. And if you read his, look, I learned much of what I learned about economics from reading Friedman. So I'm just elaborating.
Yeah.
And people, by the way, people are going to remember Friedman's.
No, but
mine's much longer.
You decided to add this layer of meaning.
Yeah.
Emphasizing the fiscal factor.
I'd always start with the fiscal. I'd always start with the fiscal.
Yeah. You think that this is the main cause, the deeper root of
Put it this way. If you let me have a stable, balanced budget, fiscal policy,
yes,
where the government is basically, its tax revenues are financing expenditures, you can let any idiot run the central bank. It's very hard to go wrong because they don't have to, they don't have to print money to help the government.
Yeah.
But if you have a fiscal authority that's every year, guess what? My country, government expenditures are far short of taxes. I have dyslexia. I said that exactly wrong. I do have dyslexia.
Yeah.
Taxes are far short of government expenditures. So every year, the government has to either sell debt or print money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the central bank becomes seeming to be important, but it's important because it was put in a situation,
Yeah.
it was forced to be an accomplice.
Yeah, I understand this. And the question now is what to do with the central bank. One idea is to try to make the most independent central bank from the political power, from the political leaders. And the other idea is non-central bank at all. Milei has been insisted with this idea.
Yeah.
We have to shut down the central bank.
Okay, so you're asking an interesting question. And you mentioned Milton Friedman.
Yes.
Okay, so he thought hard about this, and he seemed to change his mind, but he didn't really. He gave two proposals about 12 years apart about this that seemed to be opposites. But if you kind of ask, were they really opposites in terms of fundamental forces? The first was he's going to have a completely non-independent central bank. It's going to be an accomplice from day one.
Yes.
And what it's going to do is following. If you run it, you're the fiscal authority. We'll play this. You're the fiscal authority. You're running a government deficit. Your taxes are less than government expenditures. I'm going to print money and give you the money. If you run a bigger deficit,
Yes.
I'm going to print more money.
Yes.
You run a smaller deficit. If you want to stop inflation, balance the budget, and I will automatically stop printing money. That's his 1947-48 proposal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way of coordinating monetary. It's like a husband and wife. It's like the man just does everything, no responsibility. He changed his mind. In 1960, he wrote another way of coordinating, and here's what it was. It was going to be a central bank, which was independent, and what it did is, the basic version is, I will basically not print any money. He said, I'll print K% a year. I'll print the real growth rate, but it's basically zero. I will print no money. And you're the fiscal authority. There's money. I won't print it. You run a deficit. You got to sell the bonds.
Yeah. The discipline of the bonds market.
And what if people aren't going to buy the bonds? Who are you going to sell the bonds to? Not to me. Not to the central bank. You go sell them to the market. And if you can't do that, that's your problem. So that was so these are both divisions of independence.
Yes.
Now, if you kind of ask, where's the United States? So let's have these two poles.
Yes.
I don't know, what do you want, 0 to 10? Okay, so where's the United States? It's changed over time. If you look at our institutions, for the first, basically for almost 100 years, we didn't have a central bank. It's all in the Treasury. Treasury did everything, in which meant it was in the Congress. And we started having a central bank in 1914.
Yes.
With a bunch of rules about how they were supposed to be separated, and those rules have changed over time and gotten more and more complicated. And since 2000 or 2008, they've got even more complicated, which makes it. But your question is.
So it would be better not having any central bank at all? The idea of the competence of the free competence of different money that President Milei is thinking of the...
Put it this way.
So as not to print any money, so as to avoid the country have power to print any kind of money.
So, no, here's the way to think about it. Here's the way to think about it. You're asking great questions. Here's the way I think about it. You could think about institutions, central bank, treasury, or you could think about the activities of the people that work in their institutions. So when we didn't have a central bank, there were guys in the treasury who, because of political pressures on them from the market, they were doing things that central banks in other countries were.
Okay.
To the point it was actually illegal, but there wasn't. Okay. So there were forces on that. So what I'm saying is that there are activities. There's activities that the Treasury does that's really monetary, and there's activities that in my country, the U.S., there's activities the central bank does that are really congressional, or why are they doing that? So the Argentina has. Another reason I come here, Argentina has great experts, both in the government and the president, current, who are experts on these things, who know more than I do. You should be asking them. But just like I am. Like I am.
Yeah. This idea that it is very clear the cause-effect links in the creation of inflation, if there is fiscal deficit, and you can go to
sustained. That was a good quote that he quoted.
Well, it is yours.
He probably improved it.
No.
If I didn't say that,
yes.
I wish I had.
You didn't say that because here in Argentina it runs like a very well-established truth. This idea that you added this kind of layers to the phrase of this is your quotation.
I hope so. It's a nice quote.
Okay. But let me ask you something. If it is that clear that deficit is the main cause, the structural cause of inflation, because governments tend to cover this deficit printing money.
Yeah.
This is very clear for you and for Friedman, for example, and for President Milei. Why is that the Southern Cone has had a lot of process of inflation and hyperinflation. If it is that clear for macroeconomists and for politicians, why is it so difficult to press the right button in the control board of inflation?
I don't know.
Is a political will that is not working well? The authority is not enough?
It's a great question.
Because
Okay, so
the formula is clear, the equation is clear.
so you should ask your friends that more than I am, because I'm like a
My friends, my
no, you're not economist friends.
Uh-huh.
Just ask them that question, like why sometimes you see something that a government should do and it doesn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So in my country, like there's. Have you ever worked in the government? I have. I was in the U.S. Army,
Ah, okay.
and collective government bodies. They don't. There's not a market test.
Yes.
There are some tests. But it can take a long time to figure out what went wrong.
Uh-huh.
And one reason that my field's interesting is the sense in which the budget has to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily year by year. You can run temporary deficits if you balance them with surpluses. It's more on average.
Average. Okay.
It's on average. It's kind of average over time. So, example would, if you're in a business cycle, a recession,
Yes.
and you run a deficit there, but during the boom you run a surplus,
Okay.
and so your debt doesn't run up.
Yes.
Maybe you issue a little more debt during the recession, but over a surplus you retire it.
Yes.
So the debt GDP ratio doesn't grow. Okay. Okay. So the fact that it's over time, opens up the following kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of my wife says she thinks my room needs cleaning up, and I kind of agree. And I tell her I'm going to clean it up sometime this year.
Yeah.
So there's some latitude about when I'm going to do it.
Yes.
And then the year's over, and I try to kick the can down the road. But the fact that it's intertemporal makes it kind of a little more complicated to monitor.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem.
Okay. Tom, I have another question for you. The problem with South America could be also related to the lack of growth, given that the growth is not
That's
progressing.
an outcome. That's an outcome.
But let me ask you this. Imagine that a country finally applies. I want to give you this idea. If the government has no revenues, because of taxes are not enough, because the economic is not working well, the economic activity, the GDP está estancado, is stopped. So the deficit there and the inflation that comes after deficit is a problem of that the country is not growing, that the GDP is not growing. It is behind the problem of deficit, this problem of growth.
It's a good question.
Good.
It's
because it's very really strict that South America
So put it
has
this
been
way,
having
put it
this
this way.
problem for many, many years.
yeah. So this is turning into a seminar. so essentially the 20th century is like a laboratory about how to help a country, how to make a country grow and how to not make it grow. Okay, so there's various growth miracles
Yes.
in Asia. So, a kind of textbook thing is if you want to learn how to grow, go look at what they did and start doing it.
Yes. open economy, for example,
various things.
free
There's the rest of it.
market, yeah.
Yeah, taxes, low
Yes.
taxes, low government expenditures.
Yes,
Go look at Singapore. Look what it did.
yes.
So it's
So the
it's
pattern
kind of a coincidence. It's you're making me think. It's a coincidence. So the question is, could I take an economy like that and also have a high inflation economy?
Yeah.
Could I?
There has been any case in these countries of
No.
no.
No. So it's kind of coincidental that the it's kind of an interesting question. I don't. You're making me think about things. You've given me
Okay.
a research project.
Okay, great. Next question, Tom.
It's kind of interesting. Kind of the people that have done the anti-growth policies have also done policies that have kind of fed inflation. It's kind of interesting. It's a pattern, which I don't completely understand.
Because I'm thinking of the future of
Look,
yeah.
put it this way. This is going. So if you kind of ask me, a political scientist, which is a field I respect more and more, he asked me. He told me the following thing in a discussion. He said, if you see something happening in some country or region of the world, and you see some outcomes, the first question you should ask is, who wanted those outcomes?
Who?
Who wanted those to
Yeah.
happen? And I'm an economist, and he shouldn't have had to tell me that, but he did. So, example, if I see a country with high tariffs versus a country with low tariffs, he said, who in that country wanted that to happen? And that takes you, okay. So now that you could, if you start applying that in various contexts, just that question, it'll open up a whole bunch of stuff to you.
Uh-huh.
But if you kind of look across the world, like if you look at, I don't know, I'll give you an examples. You've heard of Deng Xiaoping in China, because he did this. Because he basically was a Stalinist, and for almost, I'm bad at math. All 30 years, they ran the Chinese economy as according to Marxist Leninist really command economy, and it was a very low growth, starvation of big parts of their people.
Yeah.
And then and they had an ideology that said they wanted that. So if you ask kind of who wanted that, it wasn't the Chinese people who were very entrepreneurial naturally. It wasn't them. It was, this party bureaucracy. And
Yeah.
he got very practical. He looked around the world and he said, "This isn't working." And he kind of imported. He started copying institutions that were. He went to Singapore, and Lee Kuan Yew told him, look at what we're doing, and the Chinese guys who came here were the poor ones from Guangzhou. The smart ones stayed, and look how badly you've done. He started copying.